Broken Blueprint by Vance Farrell, narrated by Samuel Nathan. Part 2C, Making a Start. How the walk in Madison began. We return now to the early fall of 1904. Edward Sutherland was 39 years old, and P.C. Megan was 4 years younger. They had a great challenge ahead of them to turn the Nelson farm into a blueprint school. Ellen White described the proposed program of the new school in the review. Quote, "The plan upon which our brethren propose to work is to select some of the best and most influential young men and women from Berrien Springs and other places in the North who believe that God has called them to the work in the South, and give them a brief training as teachers. Thorough instructions will be given in Bible study, psychology, and the history of our message, and special instruction in agriculture will be given. It is hoped that many of these students will eventually connect with schools in various places in the South. In connection with these schools, there will be land that will be cultivated by teachers and students, and the proceeds from this work will be used to support these schools." End of quote. Taken from Ellen G. White Review, August 18, 1904. Notice that the plan called for the student to go out and form more independent ministries. Ellen White concluded the above article with an appeal for our church and its members to help the young school. In a letter to Sutherland and Megan, she wrote, quote, "We greatly desire the prosperity of the school in the South, and concerning Madison School," she declared, "I have every confidence that it is our duty to purchase this land. Let us not worry. The necessary means will be provided." To Sutherland and Megan, she wrote, "We know that you are established in the right place." End of quote. Taken from Ellen White to Sutherland and Megan, July 28, 1904. Volume 2 of Manuscript Release, page 205. Elder George I. Butler, president of the Southern Union Conference with headquarters based in Nashville, was the only church leader who favored the new project. He had formerly been General Conference president, and his influence was a help to some extent. The pioneers called the new institution the Madison School. Ellen White had written a series of special testimonies to the new institutions, which she entitled the Madison School. The name fitted. Through practical in all its operation, the school organization was somewhat loose. It consisted of people happily working together to fulfill the blueprint. Elders Butler and Haskell, Helen White, P.C. Megan, Mother D. or Nellie Brilliard, M. Bessie DeGraw, and Edward Sutherland became known as the Rainbow Seven Pioneers. They formed the organization known as the Nashville Agriculture and Normal Institute, or NANI, a holding corporation. They were the trustees of Madison School, and the NANI, as the holding corporation was usually referred to. Humble beginnings. They set to work at once to build and operate a school. Students began arriving, and by the fall, 14 were enrolled. Like the teachers, they came without thought of money or worldly advantages. What money they could make was used for living expenses, and their living depended on them making something. Percy Megan, dean of the school, gathered up the reins of the mule team and supervised the farm. Miss M. Bessie DeGraw, secretary of the organization, drove to town once a week in a one-mule charter. Her objective, to market the butter which President Sutherland churned and prepared in the Land-to Creamery. The treasurer, Mother Brilliard, laid her hands to the skillet and the broom, and supervised the domestic duties of the institute. Percy Megan frequently drove to Nashville in a cart with a load of fresh produce and eggs, which he peddled from door to door. Taken from Megan Diary Entry, December 9, 1907. Class discussions during the first year centered around making a farm pay, how to bring livestock through the winter, and ways of improving soil cultivation and crop growth. Mother D was the respected head of the big house. Each morning she would swat fleas, still stiff from the chilly night. In spite of a background of comfortable affluence, she resolutely provided courage, trust, and economy. No one on the place ever complained. All were happy to have a part in the work. The president helped Elmer Brink, who had charge of the farm duties, while the dean worked in the timber with the boys. Dean Megan wrote to a friend, quote, "I have a stenographer now and do my own typing. When a man gets up at 4:30 in the morning and works in the field with a team of mules till 1 o'clock and then goes at it again till 6:30 p.m. and then conducts a study for an hour or an hour and a half, takes the responsibility of planning the work for the boys, he is doing a pretty good day's work. And when it is taken into account that this has had to be done on older and rather worn out land, with a goodly sparkle of rock and thorn bushes, and by one who has not followed the farming business since he had 18 years of age, I at least find that it has taxed my determination of purpose and capacity to meet and overcome hard problems even more than adding a relief of schools campaign. But the whole has been a good experience, and I feel more genuine iron determination and grim strenuosity in my bones today to take hold of things which needed to be done and to do them that I have ever felt in my life before. The hard life and absence of office work has built up my health, and physically I trust I am a better man than I have been for years. End of quote. Taken from Megan to W.C. White, September 7, 1905. Getting down to basics. The farm's main building, the old plantation house, had been built for cedar log over 100 years earlier, and later covered with sidings and plastered inside. Fronted by a wide veranda in the style of southern mansions, it served as the first schoolroom and meeting place by day and provided sleeping quarters at night until other buildings could be erected. Sutherland's walk to study program consisted of half a day devoted to study and the other half to labor. Money had to be raised for the buildings, machinery, livestock, and improvements. Some of these came from the well-managed dairy, which provided cash income. Sutherland and Megan knew that the students, come as they did from poor homes, could not have an education if they had to pay tuition, so no tuition was charged. They had to work their way through schools, and their instructors helped them in every way they could. This resulted in an extremely close friendship between the students and the faculty. They all worked together to solve the problems which arose. Each day began with morning worship, and the entire family gathered to sing, pray, and study God's Word. In studying it, they were studying an important part of God's plan of education for them. In those early days, the food was all cooked in one large cast iron pot, probably similar to the great pot one of the school of the prophets used many years before. See 2 Kings chapter 4 verse 38 to 44. As for the meal that first winter, it often consisted of little more than cornmeal, must or grits, and skim milk. Hopefully someone brought in some fresh greens. Otherwise, all that the meal that first winter primarily consisted of was milk, protein, and carbohydrates. Fortunately, by the next summer, the situation had radically changed. In the evenings, after all the day's studies and work had been completed, students and teachers had gathered in front of the warmth from the fireplace in the northwest room of the mansion. Sutherland, looking into their faces, would lead out in instructions and conversation on many things, such as knitting, how to poultice shepherd's hands, and much more. Because they did not have an opportunity to gather in and store some vegetables and fruits that first summer, the first winter was especially difficult. The author suggests that Hubert squash is one of the best crops which can be planted in the summer. Lay it out one level high on newspaper in a dry attic room, and you will have an abundance of squash for cooking or baking till late March the following year. 1905, gardens and orchids begin. When spring of 1905 arrived, everyone worked hard to produce a large crop. Gardens were planted. By the middle of March, the farm crew were planting trees for a future orchard. 200 apples and a lot of pear, peach, and plum. Loganberry root were planted. 1,800 strawberry plants were set out, and melons, squash, and other vegetables were started. Sutherland supervised the student crew, bought the seeds and plants, and directed the spreading of fertilizer. Everyone had to work long hours throughout the summer so they would have better food and shelter the coming winter. There were also homes to build. A crisis occurred when Rhonda, the mule, became lame. In order to haul lumber for the new building under construction, a wagon and team had to be hired at $2 a day. Stones laying all over the previously neglected ground provided additional building materials. Work, not sports. You will notice that no mention is here made of team sports or any sports for that matter. There were none. The students came to Madison to learn how to live, not how to play. They wanted to know how to support themselves while carrying on missionary work at home and overseas. And this is what they were taught. Madison had no athletic field, no baseball diamond, and no football field. There were no competitive sports because everyone was too busy cooperating in useful work. Think not that this made the situation dull. They all had a great time, and if you think otherwise, you need to try it yourself. Spend the summer walking in the garden, cutting and hauling trees in the forest, and helping to build a house or two. Not only will the satisfaction of accomplishing something worthwhile bring you deep happiness, but you will learn skills that will help you all your life. In fact, physically, you will feel better than you have in years. One of Sutherland's saying was this: our schools must not only give the students preparation for life, it must allow them to experience life. And Madison did all that and more. It prepared them to be practical, self-supporting missionaries. Quote, Sister White said that in comparing the profit and losses of manual training department, we should not estimate it upon a mere money basis, but in the light of the judgment. Then this enterprise will appear on the side of gain, not of loss. End of quote. 13th Annual Session of the SDA Educational Society, Oakland, November 17, 1887. Stating the purpose. The first letterhead of the nanny had several interesting statements printed on it. Quote, "It is the object in establishing these schools to correlate the intellectual and physical and the spiritual in education. A strong intellectual course will be offered, including Bible, history, philosophy, and the science. The motto being learned by doing, students are given an opportunity to support themselves while gaining an education with a view to making themselves self-supporting Christian laborers when out of school." End of quote. Taken from Nanny First Letterhead. That first year, Sutherland and Megan co-authored a brief statement which they published and distributed to would-be donors. It would help explain the goal of the school. Quote, "It is the purpose of these new schools to demonstrate to young men and women desirous of doing their master service that they can begin a work for him without the aid of any special equipment and with only the common building to be found on most any farm. It is our prayer that this school may be a factor in developing self-reliant, self-supporting missionary work. Those who are founding it do so without the promise of assistance, of specific support, or a definite salary from any source." End of quote. Taken from Sutherland and Megan's statement, date 1904. A.W. Spading described what those early years at Madison were like. Quote, "The Madison School was born under conditions that approximated those of pioneer days. The tables were of plank, the dressers of dry goods boxes. The food was largely restricted to what they had found in their field and the products of their dairy. This condition of enforced economy, if not exactly their choice, was at least within the plans of the founder. They knew that to train themselves and their students for service to the poor, there was nothing more effective than privation and sacrifice. Not only in the first days of hardship, but throughout its history, their school must be a school of simplicity. The body must be accomplished to hard work and simple diet. The reins of the mind must be guided by self-control and zealous purpose. The closer the living condition at the school approached those to be met when students should have become teachers, the more adaptable and efficient would those teachers be. No steam-heated, electrically lighted building, no intricate and expensive machinery, no wealth of imported foodstuff were appropriated for the men and women in training for service to the mountains. End of quote. A.W. Spading, Men of the Mountains, page 153. R.W. Scowers provided a one-paragraph summary of the objectives. Quote, "The vast majority of the students coming to Madison expected to be teachers or health workers in rural communities. They studied Bible, history, science, and grammar during the regular 9-week terms. Short 3-week sessions devoted to practical skills like carpentry, cobbing, or blacksmithing were offered between regular terms. The first year, Miss Brillard offered a 1-year course in practical nursing and hydrotherapy. Later, when a sanitarium was added to the school in 1907, this course was lengthened to 2 years. In all subjects, the emphasis was on teaching the student to be proficient enough to teach the same subject matter when he went out on his own." End of quote. R.W. Scowers, Light Bearers to the Remnant, page 247. Here is another nice summary of the work carried out by Madison. Quote, the school at Madison not only educates in a knowledge of the scripture, but it gives a practical training that fits the student to go forth as a self-supporting missionary to the field to which he is called. In his student days, he is taught how to build simply and substantially, how to cultivate the land and care for the stock. All these lines are of great educational value. To this is added the knowledge of how to treat the sick and care for the injured. This training for medical missionary work is one of the grandest objects for which any school can be established. If many more students in other of our schools were receiving the similar training, we as a people would become a spectacle to the world, to angels, and to men. The message would quickly be carried to every country, and souls now in darkness would be brought to the light. End of quote. Taken from Ellen G. White, to those bearing responsibility in Washington and other centers. January 6, 1908. Volume 11 of Manuscript Release, page 192 to 193. Dr. Lillian. Lillian Esselman was an Iowa school teacher who went to Battle Creek College in 1891, converted to the faith a few years later. She gradually kept taking additional studies until she not only completed the nurse's course, but by 1900 was a physician. She was practically expert at giving hydrotherapy treatments. Percy Megan had spent a busy but lonely years since his wife Ida had been laid to rest. When Sutherland and Megan resigned at Emmanuel Missionary College, they journeyed south to found Madison. But on some of the fundraising trips at first school year, he spent a little time getting acquainted with Lillian. One evening he jotted in his diary, quote, went for a walk with Lillian, who gave a final promise, end of quote. Megan Diary Entry, September 30, 1904. One day in early September 1905, Ed Sutherland hitched the mule to the milk cart and drove it the railway station to meet Percy and his new wife, Dr. Lillian, for that was what everyone called her. Sutherland was astonished to find that she gladly accepted the mule ride and expressed cheerful acceptance of her new quarters. Lillian fit in beautifully into this new difficult way of life. By the fall of 1905, there were a number of small functioning cabins on the place. Each faculty member or family was in a separate cottage. The exception was Percy and Dr. Lillian, who were in one of the upstairs rooms in the mansion. She later recalled that it had no running water, no bathrooms, no carpet, and no clothes closet. There were kerosene lamps for light and a small wood-burning stove for heat. For decades, the room had been used to store and dry tobacco. Lillian spent several years hauling up buckets of water and washing the odor out of the wood. The couple were anxious to have their own place. In late September, while carpenters did the heavy construction, Percy and Lillian laid the floor, leathered the rooms, except the ceiling, and did the sandpapering, painting, and furnishing. Soon their house was complete. More description of the early days. Throughout the property, the first tables were planks laid on sawhorses. Their dressers, dry goods boxes, and no two chairs or stools were alike. All equally shared in the difficulties and blessing. Everyone worked well together. and although mistakes were at times made, they learned from them how to keep doing better. It was mutually agreed that each of the faculty would receive a salary of $13 a month and were charged with board, room, laundry, livery hire, etc. At the end of the year, any profit was divided into three parts, one-third going to the teachers. In 1908, it figured at 12 cents an hour, and two-thirds used for repairs, improvements, and expansion. By 1918, the faculty member was still receiving $30 a month. In 1912, McGinn made a clarifying statement that he and Sutherland needed more money than that per month due to their traveling to raise funds. In addition, both had some property located elsewhere which brought in a little money which helped subsidize their trips. Sutherland believed the two basic principles of the schools were to make the students self-sacrificing and self-supporting. If we are to raise up men like the Apostle Paul, he would say, we should teach them to become self-supporting. Another important principle was strict and persistent economy. As the school grew, instead of building large, expensive, well-equipped buildings, the new dwelling was small, simple, and inexpensive. In this way, teachers and students could build them, and the student left the school prepared to develop similar institutions. Another principle was the one study plan. Each student carried just one major subject, and to it he gave 3 hours a day to class work in that subject and 3 hours to preparation for class. During one term, the student would cover in succession as much work as if 3 or more subjects studied had been taken simultaneously. Throughout the remaining hours of the day, the work program gave the student instruction and practice in practical work. Each student was gradually routed from one line of work to another until he received a well-rounded training in the care and management of livestock and poultry, garden and dairy, building construction, and other farm work. Another principle was self-governance. Early each fall, Sutherland called students and teachers together and started a self-governing council. This group, known as the union body, became the legislative arm of the school. Sutherland read the rules which he had earlier copied from the letter by Mother Ellen White. Quote, the rules governing the schoolroom should, so far as possible, represent the voice of the school. Every principle involved in them should be so placed before the student that he may be convinced of its justice. Thus, he will feel a responsibility to see that the rules he himself has helped to frame shall be enforced. End of quote. Taken from Education, page 290. The union body became one of the strongest single educational features of the school. When students left Madison, they already had practical experiences, not only in practical work and book knowledge, but also in governance. Quote, the governing body at Madison was not the faculty or a president's council, but the entire school family sitting in session, called the union body. Working together in this group, students and teachers jointly made rules, enforced discipline, planned for needed improvement, and directed the various departments of the school. Only matters requiring cash expenditures were referred to the board of directors. One night each week was set aside for a meeting of the union body. End of quote. Taken from R.W. Scour's Light Bearers to the Remnant, page 246. A school building was needed, but Sutherland and Megan could never quite collect enough money to build it. Then one day they decided that the Lord might want them to just keep working with what they had. Although conditions were somewhat rough, with classes and assembly meeting in the old mansion during the day and students sleeping there at night, perhaps it was best this way, so the students would be better prepared to deal with the hardships they would encounter upon graduation. In February 1906, a report on the progress of the school was sent by P.C. Megan to Ellen White. Quote, "We have a splendid class of students and they are gaining a good experience. 2 of our number had recently gone to Cuba. They will study the language and work with their hands and canvas till they can see some way open to do more. We are enduring to train workers in the simple things of the third angel's message, to teach them the Bible, philosophy and hygiene, the English language, church history, and keeping of accounts, and how to give simple treatments. We are planning that no girl should leave our schools who is not a good cook and able to make her own clothes and do simple nursing for the relief of the sick. We endeavor to have each one have an experience in canvassing our books. To some, these things do not look like an education at all. They think our school is cheap and we should pay more attention to the things of the world taught in books, in Latin and Greek and the like. Well, I have taught a good many years now in the course and I have seen but little good come out of this so-called higher education. Later, we have been following a new plan which our life in the country makes feasible. We can buy 3 cows for $100 and a butter which we can get from the 3 cows will support a boy in school for a year. We own the cows, but our students do the work of milking, butter making, and caring for them. In this way, we are able to support them in the school without any losses to ourselves, and the cows and they increase from a perpetual endowment of the benefit of the students in the school. God is teaching us many lessons of economy. We have exceedingly little to do with, but that is all the better, and it makes us all, both teachers and students, careful of every little that we do have. Besides, it will give our students a solid training in poverty and hardship and self-denial, which will be invaluable to them when they go out into the world. I long to see noble men and women go forth from our school, inured to hardship and toil, and afraid to go nowhere on earth where they may be called in the Master's service. End of quote. Taken from a letter from Megan to Ellen White, February 1, 1906. The visit of several leaders to Madison in January 1908 will be mentioned shortly. Just now, we want to quote part of Elder W.C. White's official report of the visit, which includes an interesting description of the Madison in early 1908. Quote, "It was my privilege to accompany Elder A.G. Daniels and Professor Griggs on their visit to Madison early in January. We made a very careful and thorough inspection of the place. We saw the pasture land, the rich bottomlands, the orchards, the garden, the dairy, and the poultry yard. We inspected the stables, the farm implements, the creamery, and the kitchen. We ate with the school family in the big dining room of the old log mansion house, and then visited the cottage where the students lodged. We were impressed with the thrifty appearance of the farm and the Spartan simplicity of the board and the lodgings. Afterwards, we met with the students and teachers in the modest cottage with one big room which they used as an assembly hall, and had a 2-hour conference with them over questions of preparations for service. When this conference was ended, we met with the teachers in one of the cottages and heard the story of the beginning of the work, some of the struggles, the failures and victories experienced in the mastering the work of the farm and improving the dairy. Also the plans, efforts and successes in gathering means with which to build a dozen and more cottages, and of the plans for establishing a small sanitarium in harmony with special counsel given them in numerous testimonies of instructions. End of quote. Taken from W.C. White, The Nashville Agriculture and Normal Institute Report of Plan of Organization and Working, Spring 1908. Here is a description of the first nursing institution at Madison. Quote, the first class of nursing consisted of 5 girls who received instruction from Mother D in the primitive treatment room in the old plantation house. Hydrotherapy, massage, bed making, handling of patients, and the principles of a healthful diet were covered in the course. End of quote. Taken from Merlin Neff, For God and CME, page 145. Why is nutrition, hydrotherapy, and obedience to the 8 laws so crucial? Proper food and attention to the 8 laws builds the body. Water therapy brings the blood to and from the affected parts and heals the body. The life is in the blood. Leviticus chapter 17, verse 11. It is not in poisonous compounds. For the 8 laws of health, see a 105 books, Ministry of Healing, page 127, paragraph 2. Read pages 126 to 128. The chapter was written to physicians and health educators. In 1906, Ellen White wrote, quote, I fully believe that those who are connected with the school at Madison are carrying out the will of God. End of quote. Taken from Ellen White, letter dated October 30, 1906, in the Madison School. Preparation for the sanitarium. In the summer of 1906, Ellen White visited Madison. Delighted at their arrival, the faculty and the students arranged a picnic. While they all sat eating lunch on a beautiful wooded slope just west of the school building, Mother White, as she was affectionately known to them, said, this would be a good spot for a sanitarium. Silence fell on everyone. No one answered her, but they all heard a word. The picnickers continued to pass the food. Then Mother White spoke again. You say you have no money, but you need to have faith. She looked around to them all, and each one felt the weight of that look. Do you have faith anymore? Get your people together and get our oars and mark out the site, even though you don't have money to begin. Everyone was stunned, but when they finished the picnic lunch, they all hurried to their little chapel, knelt and prayed together. Then they got a mule, hitched him to a plow, and marked out the spot where the sanitarium would be built. Not long after Ellen White went back to California, a tired and ailing businessman from Nashville stopped by one day. I have heard that you folks give treatment for the sick and furnish them a healthful diet. Will you let me come here and try to get well? Said Mother Brillett. We are not quite ready for that yet. But the man would not be put off. So Mother D screened off a corner of the plantation house porch. Then, with their usual determination and skill, she and her 3 nursing students helped him so much that he recovered his health, went back to Nashville, and spread the word that the folks out at Madison get people well. This meant they had to get to work and build something. The first sanitarium consisted of a small cottage with a capacity of 11 beds and had treatment rooms opening into a porch. Kerosene lamp lighted the place and a wooden stove heated it. Kettle pots set on top of the stove provided water for hydrotherapy treatment. The treatment table consisted of a wide board on 2 sawhorses. Soon the elite of Nashville were wending their way to this little place out in the country. Here they found not only physical restoration but Christian warmth and the love of Christ. Quote, "First, a cottage was built for the sanitarium in the grove which Mrs. White at the first pointed out, saying this would be a good place for a sanitarium. So it grew and it grew until it became the 4th in size and equipment of all the Seventh-day Adventist sanitarium in America." End of quote. Taken from A.W. Spading, Christ's Last Legion, page 171. Progress in 1907. The year 1907 was a difficult one. Drought hit the entire area and greatly reduced the summer harvest. However, in spite of many difficulties, under McGinn's supervision, work on a large sanitarium building continued while Sutherland went to the West Coast to raise money. When the sanitarium was completed, Dr. Newton Evans joined the group and became the first medical superintendent of the institution. Gradually, they were to keep enlarging it. Later that year, McGinn expressed their objective in these words, quote, "We have toiled and struggled against a great many difficulties during the last 4 years. We have felt that we were willing to pass through these experiences if we could only see the fulfillment of the testimonies concerning Christian education and self-supporting missionary work by the lay members." End of quote. Taken from a letter from Megan to W.C. White, December 3, 1907. Leaders visit Madison. In February 1907, Ellen White wrote this to the leadership of the Southern Union Conference, quote, "There is need of such an institution as has been established near Nashville, and let no one endure to hinder the attendance of those who can at that school best receive the training that will fit them to labor in the southern states and in other missionary fields." End of quote. Taken from E.G. White to Southern Union Conference Committee, February 24, 1907. In January 1908, delegates from the Southern Union Conference Assembly in Nashville, while there, they had reports of the plans and activities of the NANI, or Nashville Agricultural and Normal Institute, still the official name of Madison at that time. Suspicions against Madison continued to be strong in many minds for 4 reasons: Madison's ownership, management, curriculum, and support. To put it into a word, it was independent. But before the conference began, words were suddenly received at Madison that some important visitors were about to arrive. A.G. Daniels, W.C. White, G.W. Irwin, M.E. Kern, and Fred Riggs. We have several descriptions of what happened. We have already quoted part of Elder W.C. White's official report, which provided an interesting description of Madison in the early 1908. Here is part of Elder Haskell's report. He was still president of NANI's Board of Trustees. Opening quote, "The school is yet in its infancy, but the instructors are seeking in all things to follow the light that God has given and actually demonstrating the unity of returning to the original plan of education. Already there is a marked change in the farm under their cultivation. It is the object of the school to give the student an education which shall make them efficient in all useful employments, such as carpentry, farming, dairying, poultry raising, gardening, etc., as well as in the knowledge obtained from books, and to do self-supporting work in any field to do which they are called. At present, there are but few schools where the value of manual training is emphasized as a means of self-support. End of quote. Taken from S.N. Askell, Report of the President of NAMI, Spring 1908. 1908, Discussions with Leaders. Lastly, we shall take a peek of Megan's private diary notation, reprinted with all its unusual abbreviation, initial caps, and all the rest. These diary entries tell an intriguing story. Quote, January 3rd. E.A. Sutherland received letter from Omar Salisbury from Washington. Tell that H.E. Rogers, the Statistical Secretary of General Conference, had told him that the reason Nanny was not listed in the 1907 yearbook was because the leader had told him that we were independent, got our own money, and made no report to an organized body. January 5th. Received words that Daniels, W.C. White, Irwin, Kern, and Griggs would arrive in Nashville tomorrow. January 7. Held a council and prayer meeting at Mrs. Drillard's preparatory to the arrival of Elder Daniels, White, et al. Went to Madison with the old mayor and Mrs. Lankers Reed and met them. White and Griggs pleasant, Daniels very distant. After dinner took them all over the premises. Daniels did not seem very impressed with the place, thought it, I judge, pretty tough looking. In that evening, Daniels spoke to the school, very stiff at first, but God laid hold of him and warmed him up. Finally, he prayed for the nanny. Afterwards, M.B. DeGraw told him that was glad he at last could pray for the school. January 8th. Churned, and that is cream to make butter. Grigg spoke at worship and said nothing. Reeses and White spoke. Then all general meeting in which members of the school spoke of hope and desires. Subject, the work. Then Daniels, White, Griggs, Dillard, DeGraw, Megan, Sutherland met at Mrs. Lanker's for conference. Talked. Subject, the South first, and opened their eyes to real conditions. After dinner, N.H. Dillard read them financial statement, but little clashing and another meeting promised. January 13. Meeting in Nashville. E.A. Sutherland, DeGraw, N.H. Dillard, and I all gave reports of Nanny. These reports took the house. They were the feature of the day. E.A. Sutherland drew one chorus after another of amens. I read the famous white man letter. Subject, the charter. E.A. Sutherland returned to Madison. Marcus White, 1802 to 1847, was a famous American Presbyterian pioneer, physician, and missionary amongst the Indian in the Oregon Territory. He established two mission schools, one near the site of the present city of Walla Walla. His group experienced many hardships and in 1847 were slain by Cayuse Indians, provoked to the act by Jesuit missionaries working with French traders. January 14. Willie White notified me of the committee on investigation of how Chata was wanted. Also, he wanted a list of our needs to place before the conference. I found E.A. Sutherland to return. He came in on the 9:50 a.m. Aunt Nell, Miss DeGraw, E.A. Sutherland, and I had a talk. Subject: the situation. January 15. In open conference, I moved that Judge Simmons, W.H. Wilcox, and F. Riggs be committee to investigate Chata, etc. House thought it would be insult to us, made them vote it. E.A. Sutherland had long talked with Fred Riggs. Subject: all troubles, etc. Riggs saw we had the W.B. White crowd in a hard place. January 16. Met Elder G.W. Irwin and Casey Russell, who had arrived night before. Found Brother Riggs had gone. Got Casey Russell to act on committee on investigation of Nanny in his place. Judge Simmons, A.W. Wilcox, Casey Russell, accompanied by self, went to courthouse, examined deeds to property and Chata unanimously. Bowman quibbling a little as usual. At 11:30 again to 2:30 committee on plans with E.A. Sutherland and P.T. Megan present meeting. W.C. White called Daniels to speak. Subject: status of Madison School and relative to conference. A.G. Daniels considered our organization should continue untrammeled, that there should be cooperation. Offered peace, we accepted. January 19. We talked over reconciliation with the General Conference. April 20 to 26, in Washington, talked with Daniels and others. He very friendly and sincere. Met with committees, etc. End of quote. This is taken from Megan Diary entries, January 3rd to 8 and 13 to 16 and 19, and April 20 to 26, 1908. Madison was a special school. It was training workers for mission field, both in America and overseas. As the graduate went out from it, the plans was that some would support themselves while working for souls. Still others would start new medicine elsewhere and multiply the training process. The plan of leaders in all ages is that everything operates in an orderly manner, with each level of operation subservient to another. The medicine plan was multiplication of trained laymen to go out, convert, and multiply still more workers. Here is part of the letter that Ellen White had her son read to the assembly delegates at the above Nashville meeting. Quote, Brethren Sutherland and Megan are chosen of God and faithful, and the Lord of heaven says of them, I have a special work for these men to do at Madison, a work of educating and training young men and women for mission fields. The Spirit of the Lord will be with His workers if they will walk humbly before Him. He has not bound about and restricted the labors of these self-denying, self-sacrificing men. End of quote. Taken from Ellen G. White, Message to Delegates attending Southern Union meeting at Nashville, January 6, 1908. Many years later, in recalling those days at Madison, Megan wrote this to Warren Owl, quote, From Berrien Springs, some of us, as you know, went down to Madison, Tennessee by the counsel and advice of Ellen G. White. Do not think I am imparting information to you when I state that as far as the principle and plans, which is an educational way governed in the Nashville Agricultural Normal Institute, are concerned, they have never been very kindly received by the leaders in this denomination. I have letters after letters in my old files ridiculing our work there, styling it cheap, fanatical, etc. I am ready to grant that the educational work there is not perfect and undoubtedly in many respects is very faulty, but I do believe that the fundamental idea are in the main right and that God has blessed the efforts far beyond our own sanguine expectation. End of quote. Taken from P.C.T. Megan, Letters to Warren Owl, January 13, 1926. Unfortunately, the peace treaty of 1908 would eventually end. 1909 General Conference Session. In 1909, General Conference Session was held on May 13 through June 6. Sutherland traveled to it while Megan remained at Madison. But then on June 4, Megan received a telegram telling him to immediately come to Washington. The next day, he boarded a train for Tacoma Park Station. The plan was to get Megan to move to the General Conference and become Secretary of the Negro Work, a new department invented so they could put him in charge of it. Haskell met him at the train and told him not to do it. On June 8, he met with Daniels and other high-level leaders and declined their offer. His diary entry for the day was sufficient. Quote, June 8, met Daniels, Olsen, Westworth, Megva, et al. They laid their plans before me. I declined. Talked with Sister White, who told me not to bring my family to Washington. She told me that they have separated themselves from you and you from themselves. There will be a division. End of quote. Megan diary entry for June 8, 1909. The plan was to get Megan an important fundraiser out of Madison, so the work there would be weakened and eventually fold. The previous year, the General Conference had sent him an urgent call to become superintendent of the Korean mission. As he eventually did, Ellen White followed up a conversation that same day with a letter, not only to Megan but also to Sutherland. Quote, I am instructed to say to you, be careful as to what moves you now make. You need now to be careful that you do not take one step in the path where He is not going before you and guiding you. You should not leave your present field of labor unless you have clear evidence that it is the Lord's will for you to do so. End of quote. Taken from E.G. White to Sutherland and Megan, June 8, 1909. Unpublished Testimonies, page 447. She also added, quote, we hear much of the higher education as the world regards the subject, but those who are ignorant of the higher education as it was taught and exemplified in the life of Christ are ignorant of what constitutes the higher education. Higher education means walking together with Christ. By pen and voice, labor to sweep back the false idea that have taken possession of man's mind regarding higher education. Higher education means conformity to the terms of salvation. I bid. End of quote. The above warning was almost prophetic. It would only be a few years before the thought would come strongly to Megan to leave Madison for what he thought was an important work somewhere else. 1911 to 1915. Diary entries. Between 1911 to 1915, we find several significant entries in Megan's diary. They reveal that not everyone valued the spirit of prophecy counsel and that the peace made in 1906 had later evaporated. In 1911, A.G. Daniels said something very significant to Megan. Quote, January 2nd, E.A. Sutherland arrived from Chicago, told me that he met Daniels, who is sick. Daniels spoke at Dr. David Paulson's City Rescue Mission, the lifeboat mission in Chicago, and slept there. Daniels didn't believe people should get out of the cities. End of quote. Megan Diary Entries, January 2nd, 1911. It was clear that even oft-repeated spirit of prophecy counsel did not bear much weight with him. In 1913, Megan met with several physicians and high-ranking church leaders in Nashville. Quote, February 6th, after listing those who were present, judges preferred versus or against E.A. Sutherland's subject, articles in Lifeboat. There is Paulson Chicago Journal on organization. Weight, fears a kingdom within a kingdom. Weight suspicioned as not being true to organization. Weight said there was no place for us to conduct a school within the denomination. Says leading educators criticized our work, accused E.A. Sutherland of belittling Berrien Springs and Graceville, a Tennessee Conference Academy. Don't like our conversation. We accused him and General Conference of violating their pact made at the last General Conference. His Wisconsin speech, he's telling Walter that we were of the devil and testimonies not good. End of quote. Taken from Megan Diary Entry, February 6, 1913. November 26. I went downtown and met Elder W.C. White at Prodo Hotel. He told of storm brewing versus or against us at Washington, Chicago versus or against M.B. DeGraw getting students illicitly at Berrien, EAS, heretical teaching, my salary, etc., left at noon. End of quote. Taken from Megan Diary Entry, November 26, 1913. February 28, Madison. E.A. Sutherland received letters from F.M. Wilcox stating that no notices, request or subject, Madison could appear in R&H. End of quote. Megan Diary Entry, February 28, 1915. The problem of Madison came up again at the 1915 Annual Council. Quote, in the preamble of the recommendations voted by the General Conference, some of the problems were stated. Since the Nashville Agricultural and Normal Institute of Medicine and the rural schools affiliated with it were not under direct conference control and management, the question naturally arose as to their relation to the organized work. The two chief causes of frictions were listed. First, the teachings given, or said to have been given, in them relative to organization and conference work. And second, the manner in which the funds for their establishment and maintenance were secured. End of quote. Taken from Merlin Neff, For God and CME, page 177. Sanitarium work enlarges. The folks at Madison hoped that the opposition from leaders at Washington was past and were thankful for it. At about that time, a smallpox epidemic struck the student body, brought in by two new students from the Dakotas. Dr. Lillian immediately contacted the country health officer and, setting to work with two nurses, brought 8 cases through without a loss of one. The physicians in Nashville were deeply impressed. Soon more people were coming to Madison Cottage after Cottage was constructed, provided more rooms for expansion for their sanitarium faculties. By 1910, Sutherland felt that the school was doing much better. It had made outstanding advances in the 6 years since its founding. And Doctors Newton Evans and Lillian Megan were doing a good work. At this juncture, Sutherland and Megan began to think seriously of something Kellogg had told them they should do in earlier years at Battle Creek.